Welcome, I'm Walt Gray. Over the next half hour, we're looking at the third week of the second Trump administration and its impact on California. This week, Governor Newsom visited Washington, D.C., asking the Trump administration and members of Congress for federal disaster relief for the Los Angeles County fires. Newsom met with Democrats and Republicans in Congress. The governor's Oval Office meeting with the president was closed to the press. The White House said the meeting on Wednesday lasted for more than an hour and a half. It was very productive. No other details have been released. The damage caused by the LA fires in January could now cost up to $165 billion. That's according to a new analysis from UCLA. The University School of Management found that total property and capital losses could range between $95 billion and $164 billion, with insured losses estimated at $75 billion. Following the fires, insurance company State Farm already requesting to increase rates in California by an average of 22%. The State Department of Insurance is now looking into that. And following the fires, the president continued to repeat claims that water from the north would have prevented the fires, which we will dive deeper into a little bit later on in this show. And there have been talks about preventing future catastrophic fires through forest management reform and clearing vegetation around the electrical grid. Here to help break down the issue is Rich Eisen, editor-in-chief of Capitol Weekly. You were quick to point out a new fire bill that was introduced this past week that got bipartisan support in California.
Yeah, it actually happens. It happens more than we think, but a lot of times on these really big hot-button issues, not so much. Fire, of course, has become such a significant problem here in California, going back decades, really. Yes, this week at the Capitol, a very large group of both Republican and Democratic and senators came together to talk about legislation that they're introducing that would make Cal Fire firefighters permanent. So maybe a lot of people don't know, 3 months of the year, about I think it's about 11 or 1,200 or maybe 1,500 of these firefighters essentially get furloughed and they go on unemployment. And because in theory, November to January there wasn't a fire season, and so they weren't needed. Well, I think if we've learned anything over the last decade, there is no such thing as the non-fire season. We're in fire season all the time, and that was the gist of the bill. Now, what would it do? It would make these people permanent. It would, if there were not actual fires to be fighting, they could be participating in fire mitigation practices. A lot of prevention. So that's a great thing. Now, it's worth noting this bill also was passed in a slightly different form last year, and Governor Newsom vetoed the bill. And there was some concerns he had over the constitutionality, I think that's how you say it, of how the workers would be classified. He and Senate Pro Tem Mike McGuire have I think a distinctly different view on that, but they've gone back to the drawing board. They have adjusted the bill, hopefully to deal with anything that the governor opposed, and we'll see. It got through fairly with strong support last year. It should do so again this year, I would think.
So the governor was in Washington, D.C., meeting with the president earlier this week. A fly on the wall. How do you think that goes when they're in private? Is there the same type of jockeying and posturing going on? Because really, ultimately, if the governor is there asking for federal dollars to help with Los Angeles, the president can say, I'm not going to give you a dime unless you do what?
Well, yeah, I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that room, too. It's so hard to know because this president has a very distinct public persona, but he also, and I have a friend who was one of his ghostwriters, and I've heard a lot of how he is when he's not in front of a camera, and it's often quite different. My guess is, he probably did say this is where we're at, and our governor said, well, this is where we're at, and nobody came out singing Kumbaya, but it did seem like they were keeping it civil, so. That's in all of our best interests, so we'll cross our fingers and hope that is how it played out.
The Trump-proofing bill, though, goes forward in California. Trump knows that. Yeah. $50 million. Half of that, obviously, is going to be going towards immigration assistance, I guess you could say. So how do you think the president reacted to that, knowing that the state is legally loading up against him?
Well, I mean, I think at the moment he probably feels pretty confident in the courts being. Though I would say so far the courts have not been on his side on a lot of his executive orders. That said, I think they're counting probably on some of these things getting to the Supreme Court, and who knows? They haven't all, despite what I think a lot of people feel, they haven't actually given him a blank check. So I think one of the things that's coming in our legislature though about that bill, and this is the Republicans' opposition to this, has been, there's nothing that dictates whether or not some of this defense would be funded for people who have been accused or have maybe already been convicted of committing serious crimes. I think you have to ask the Democrats, is this the hill you want to die on? Because, regardless of wherever you're at on immigration as a general topic, I think that's one of those things that's going to be problematic for them with voters.
This week, the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Department has a message for farm workers who fear deportation. With the help of translators, the sheriff met with farm workers after hearing concerns of immigration and customs enforcement visiting their workplace. An advocate for the farm workers says he requested the meeting after hearing workers had seen ICE agents at a field in Cortland in Sacramento County. Magana says the sighting was actually officials with local law enforcement. He says there's a lot of worry right now, but the sheriff says he wants residents to know the sheriff's office is there for them.
And I was worried that bad guys were going to try and take advantage of the situation and either pretend like they're ICE or victimize our citizens in just, a normal fashion, where they're robbing or stealing from them or whatever, and then telling them, hey, if you call the police, they're going to deport you.
What are the rules? A lot of deportation talk going on. We hear ICE is in a neighborhood, but then it turns out they're not, and then they're kind of hit or miss. What are the rules right now in California? Is federal law apply? California rules apply? Do police jurisdictions warrant helping? Not? Where are we this?
Well, isn't that the million-dollar question here of late, right? I mean, in California, it's a little complicated because we passed the law in 2017 that essentially, bars local police departments from cooperating with ICE. But that's also a little sketchy how that's interpreted. We know the feds have primacy over anything related to immigration. Whether or not a police entity wants to cooperate, we've certainly seen some down in sanctuary cities who have said, well, we're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. We're going to cooperate. It really is kind of a jumble that I think where the final determination is yet to be made as to exactly how this is going to play out. We know the Trump administration has threatened to file charges against officials who don't cooperate with ICE in these situations. So I think it's really a very tenuous situation right now. I'm not sure anyone has the exact answer.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot from law enforcement saying ICE is going to handle whatever they're going to handle. Could it be arbitrary, where it may be a conservative city or town where law enforcement is more willing to assist ICE? Or is that something you're feeling will be worked out at some point?
Well, we're already seeing it. I mean, Huntington Beach and other cities have said, their mayors or police agencies have said, we're absolutely not going to adhere to any sanctuary city. Whatever our, if our city council has adopted this, it doesn't matter. We're going to uphold the law as we're being told to uphold it by, the federal administration. So we're already seeing that, right? And I think, not every city in California is a sanctuary city. So you cross over from one city into another, there's a whole new set of rules. So and this week lawmakers have adopted legislation setting aside about $50 million. A big part of that is to help the Attorney General's office and others defend immigrant rights cases. So I think so much has yet to be determined how this is all going to play out.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I know we did run a story. San Joaquin County Sheriff's Department and the Stockton Police Department do not work with ICE. They're not saying that ICE is bad or anything like that. They just don't work with them. ICE is on their own. And they wanted the immigrants to know that. Vern Pearson is the DA in El Dorado County. Vern is a conservative. He's asking the state DA for clarification to what we're talking about. Is it federal law, state law? So even DA Pearson's not clear on this.
Well, I think that's a pretty standard thing right now. I mean, in the law that I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of exceptions. If a person, an undocumented person, was accused of certain crimes, and it's, serious crimes is how they were defined, but that could be all kinds of things: robbery, rape, murder. Is there something close to that maybe the particular jurisdiction could interpret as a serious crime? That I admit I don't know. It's entirely possible, though, that a lot of DAs don't know either. This is, again, it's never really been completely settled.
All right, tariffs. The president obviously was very clear with Mexico and Canada about tariffs, although that has been pushed back to March at this point. Mexico responded, Canada responded. But with China, 10% tariff, I believe, was the dollar figure on that. How are the Chinese tariffs affecting us in California, or will?
Well, I think they will. We haven't seen it quite yet, but I think we will. I mean, if you look at, if you just look at from the macro, there's almost nothing that this will not affect. Whether it's food, clothes, computers, any other electronics. I mean, because, things are made of other things, and somewhere in there, the thing you need is going to be subject to these tariffs. And there is no way in the world that the company's paying these, and it is the companies that pay the tariffs. I know some people think, oh, the government pays those. No, they do not. The companies pay these, and then what they do is they'll turn around and pass it on to the consumer. And so pretty much everything that we as consumers buy is going to be affected by this. How much? We don't know. Maybe it's just 10%, maybe it's more. We'll see.
We did a story also earlier this week. It was in an auto repair shop. And the guy was saying that he wasn't even aware where he gets batteries in and auto parts in. If it's from China or it's from Mexico, he's like, wow, I got a car the other day where half of the parts were made in Mexico and they weren't sure how much the car eventually would cost as we go on this year. So to your point, right, this does affect, Chinese tariffs do affect the mom and pop auto repair guy.
Absolutely. I mean, and look, the situation with Canada might be even more dire in some ways because so many things in the automotive chain are made in Canada. One thing, I don't know how many people understand, when a car being built, there might be back and forth between Canada, Mexico, and the United States 7 or 8 times.
Yeah.
So there's no way you're going to avoid paying a lot more for something if any one of the China, Mexico, or Canada is being hit with these tariffs.
Do you see everything that's gone on with Newsom, back to him for a moment, everything that's gone on with him, has he weathered this storm of the LA County wildfires, do you think? Because there was a time there where I think the Republicans felt that he was on the ropes, along with the mayor of LA, Karen Bass. Do you feel that the governor has pulled through this, at least with any future plans he may have?
Well, I think the Trump administration gave him a big boost in that regard by, starting out, from day one with this fire hose of executive orders, and now, everything we know of what's going on with Elon Musk and the Treasury. And, I think people's minds shifted right away to, dealing with, what they feel are a lot of perceived threats. I mean, I think a lot of people. I was at the big protest at the Capitol this week, and nobody was talking about the fires. I did have a moment though. I ran into State Senator Aisha Wahab, and we were talking a little bit. She just happened to be walking by. She wasn't involved in it, but that was the first thing she brought up when I asked her thoughts about this. Was, well, yes, we need to play defense against the Trump administration's worst motives here. But we have to deal with the fires. We have to deal with recovery. These are the things that people need right now, today, and they are expecting us to do something about it. And so we're going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think, that focus is on them as much as it is on Gavin Newsom. So, yeah, I think to some extent, the spotlight eased off him a little bit in any negative way. And now, I think he's going to get to move forward in a positive, because he's issued a ton of executive orders himself in the last 3 weeks trying to mitigate the worst effects of this fire in the recovery process.
California's controversial high-speed rail project is taking on more criticism after President Trump's comments from the Oval Office this week. Trump called high-speed rail the worst managed project he's ever seen. The president criticized the project's schedule and finances, threatening to launch an investigation himself. ABC 10's Jeannie DeWin spoke to California lawmakers and a Central Valley mayor about the threat. They urged naysayers to be patient, saying this project will benefit the Central Valley and the state.
It's impossible that something could cost that much. And now it's not even going to San Francisco, and it's not going to Los Angeles.
On Tuesday, President Donald Trump criticized California's controversial high-speed rail project.
We're going to start a big investigation on that because I've never seen anything like it.
Many Republicans echo the president's concerns. Congressmember Kevin Kiley even recently introduced legislation to stop federal funding. But Republican Fresno Mayor Jerry Dyer says this project is crucial for the Central Valley.
Here's the reality. We need high-speed rail here in the valley to be able to connect us to the rest of the California economy.
Dyer says he understands the criticisms and would support any investigation from the president.
Why the cost overruns? Why the delays? I have those same questions, and I know the president has called for some type of a audit or a study to be done. I support that.
In October 2024, the High-Speed Rail's Inspector General published this report saying the current project from Merced to Bakersfield faces a funding gap of $6.5 billion and intends to fill that with federal grant funds. This week, the Inspector General released this report saying the project is falling behind schedule and will not meet its target deadline.
He hasn't seen the rest of the plan that we'll come forward with this year.
As a member of the California Senate Transportation Committee, Democratic Senator Dave Cortese has worked with Congress to secure billions of dollars to the high-speed rail project. If federal funding is at risk, Cortese says that will only be 5% of the project's total cost of $80 billion.
It would be hard to blame him if the project collapsed because there's so much more money that's needed that California is responsible for raising outside of the federal government.
California's High-Speed Rail Authority declined an interview request with ABC 10 on Wednesday, but pointed to recent comments where the CEO reiterated his focus on staying on budget and schedule.
Laser focused on building more and getting it delivered sooner, economically, smarter, and faster.
ABC 10 reached out to Congressman Kiley's team for an interview as well. His team says the congressman was not available, but says following Trump's comments, it appears the president will sign his bill to cut the federal dollars to that project. Congress would still need to pass that legislation. It's unclear how the president plans to investigate the project. Surrounded by children on Wednesday, the president signed an executive order banning transgender athletes from participating in women's sports. The order mandates schools and athletic associations to align with the Trump administration's view, which interprets sex as the gender somebody was assigned at birth. The White House warns that federal funding and legal action could be taken if the rule is not followed. The California Interscholastic Federation, which governs state high school sports competitions, allows transgender athletes. Their guidelines state all students should have the opportunity to participate in CIF activities in a manner that's consistent with their gender identity. CIF leaders tell the San Francisco Chronicle they'll continue to follow state law, ensuring trans student athletes can participate with teams corresponding with their gender identity. Last month, a Republican lawmaker out of Orange County introduced legislation in Sacramento that would ban trans girls from competing in girls' sports. That bill is awaiting a committee date. And this week, California leaders are closely watching what happens to the Federal Department of Education. The president is expected to call for the education secretary to submit a proposal for dismantling the department and send education policy back to the states. The state superintendent has said if this were to happen, California would lose nearly $8 billion in funding for public education and would call on the legislature and governor to backfill that funding. But the president can abolish the Department of Education. Can he do that on his own? To verify, here's Courtney Robinson.
In 2023, President Donald Trump made a campaign promise to close the DOE.
And one other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states.
Democratic lawmakers claim he cannot do that with an executive order. Let's verify if that's true using these sources. The Constitution gives the president a number of powers, like granting pardons, vetoing bills, and acting as commander-in-chief. The Constitution says nothing about abolishing federal agencies. Congress has that power through legislation. Federal law does allow the president to give lawmakers what's called a reorganization plan to consider. It would lay out how the agency's operations could either be cut or passed off to another agency. Even with Republicans in control in both chambers, support for eliminating an entire department historically has not come easy. There are also filibuster rules that could force a supermajority vote on the issue, which is even harder to secure. Another option, Congress can pass what's called a Reorganization Act, which would give the president specific guidelines to follow. The last time that was used to abolish a federal agency was in 1933 under FDR. So we can verify, no, the president does not have the power to abolish a federal agency on his own. He would still need congressional approval. The president's executive order can still heavily impact the Department of Education by shutting down programs and shifting operations to other parts of the government. With your Verify, I'm Courtney Robinson.
Back again, Rich Eisen, editor-in-chief of Capital Weekly. So Trump 100 days, as you can see right here. Has anything surprised you in the first 100 days? Did you feel that he would try to shut down Department of Education? Did you feel he would shut down USAID? Has he been pretty consistent with what you thought he would do?
Well, as long as I've been doing this, I like to say that nothing surprises me anymore. But I think, yes, to some extent, I think the speed at which a lot of this stuff came out. I mean, look, they put all this in writing. Project 2025 was out there forever for people to go look and read the whole 900 pages if they wanted to. They shouldn't be surprised at all, you know, when you look at how many people involved in that were members of his previous administration. I mean, if you say I caught completely by surprise, well, you just weren't paying attention because they made it clear what they were going to do. The speed of it all, sure. And I don't think I had not heard him say anything about USAID.
Right.
Conservatives have hated the Department of Education forever, so that's not overly surprising. What I think caught us all a little off guard was we figured the DOGE thing was going to be something that had a process to it. Having them literally come in and hook up private servers and lock out the workers and this whole process, that has been shocking. I will say that to me, I never thought I would see that in my life.
Yeah, I think the Democrats are saying, listen, we need to get some rules in here, because you know they're looking, and Elon Musk is looking into people's private accounts, I think, and that has to be litigated, I believe.
Well, and it will be. And again, a lot of the folks I know I talked to around the rally, that was by far the biggest concern was Elon Musk has my private data.
Right.
That scares people, and it should.
Okay, we thank you, as always, the editor-in-chief of Capital Weekly, Rich Eisen. Rich, thank you. This week marked a deadline for 2 million federal government employees to accept a buyout as part of DOGE head Elon Musk's effort to cut the federal government workforce under Trump's direction. That program offers to continue to pay federal employees through September 30th. Some employment lawyers have questioned the lawfulness of this because Congress is responsible for authorizing workers' paychecks and not the White House. California is home to more than 147,000 federal workers. Only Washington, D.C. and Virginia are home to more federal workers than California. The impact of these buyouts is yet to be seen. Since taking office, the president signed executive orders in an attempt to overhaul California's water delivery system. The president continues to claim more water from the north would have helped the LA fires, and has said California's water is coming from Canada. ABC 10's Alex Bell asked a California water policy expert if that's true.
California's water, a complicated system that's been in the spotlight since President Donald Trump took office. President Trump claiming again that California receives water from Canada.
I don't know if you saw the pictures that were released of the water pouring down from the Pacific Northwest and Canada and lots of other places. and it's a pretty amazing sight.
Jeffrey Mount, a founding director of the Center for Watershed Sciences at UC Davis and PPIC senior fellow, says it's simply not true.
We do not get a drop of water from Canada or Oregon, for that matter. I mean, our nearest neighbor. We do get some water out of the Colorado River, but we take it out of the Colorado River in California. So really, we're a self-sufficient, self-contained state, which actually makes us a little unique in the West.
Trump recently signed an executive order calling for federal agencies to come up with a plan to, quote, ensure adequate water resources in Southern California. The president continues to insist more water from the north would have helped with the Los Angeles fires. But Mount says
the executive order was somehow connected to fires in Southern California. And the federal government does not deliver any water to Southern California. They only deliver it as far south as the southern San Joaquin Valley. So that was very confusing to many people.
Under the direction of the executive order, the Army Corps of Engineers, who operate several large dams in the Tulare Basin, which are located in the Central Valley, began releasing water last week.
This water ran down the channels below the dams and out into the fields where nobody's growing any crops, nobody's irrigating anything. So it was a mystery to all of us who looked at it, because not a drop of that water will make it to Southern California, not one drop.
President Trump also saying his executive order is
giving Los Angeles and the entire state of California virtually unlimited water, which they could have done 5 years ago.
Mount says that an unlimited water supply is simply unheard of.
For more coverage on President Trump's first 100 days, ABC 10 is streaming news conferences, special reports, and more. It's all on the free ABC 10 Plus TV streaming app, wherever you stream.
Hi, I'm Alex Bell. Join me weeknights at 6:30 on To The Point. Instead of just reporting on the problems, we cut through the noise and look for solutions. We're not afraid to investigate local stories. We're not afraid to include different perspectives. We're not afraid to hold those in power accountable. This is your community, and it's my community too, and we're here to make it better for everyone. Join me, Alex Bell, on To The Point, weeknights at 6:30, only on ABC 10.